All right, welcome back. You've made it through the real heavy coding part. We're going to be, over the next lessons, doing a lot more conceptual, kind of introducing you to the idea of web mapping. What is mapping? What are we doing when we're making maps? What are the kind of technologies and special things when it comes to making maps online that's different than making print maps? What kind of technologies are involved? What are different options? Stuff like that. We're going to come back to code after this, and we're going to be working in a couple specific libraries, one that I've mentioned so far, Leaflet, and another called MapLibra. But to start out, I thought I'd just open us up on a Google map and talk a little about some of the main differences. We're going to go over concepts like tiling, how you get data, what are different mapping libraries. But just to open up, let's look at some of the differences between paper maps and web maps. So one of the most obvious ones is that we can zoom. On a web map, we can zoom in and out, and the details change at different levels. Like a paper map, you can't do that. You can sure look at it closer, but the details are never going to appear and disappear depending how closely you look at it. You can scroll, you can hover over things, you can click them for more information. I can click here and suddenly I see all this information about Vancouver. There's pictures attached to it. There's ratings associated with things. I can change the layer. I can suddenly see this as a satellite view or as your more traditional road map. So we can turn off and on different layers. There's even Street View, right? Like we've all seen some of Street View. It's in a sense much more like customizable. Like when we're going to be making our own map, we can turn off and on layers. We can change colors of things. We can change them after we make it the first time, unlike print map, of course. It's much more accessible to make, obviously. We don't need a giant printer with tons of ink and tons of cartographic information. There's libraries that are pre-built for us to just make this, throw it on our website, and still do a lot of customization. But what we do need, instead of a big printer, is we need the stuff that we've just spent the last 2 or 3 sections going over, which is knowledge of programming, knowledge of making our way through these different types of software that are going to help us make a map. Now, you could avoid a lot of this technical stuff by using pre-built programs to do a lot of it. You don't need programming in order to make maps that are digital that can go on the web. Things like ArcGIS is a huge company that's been around for a long time, and you can do all kinds of stuff with ArcGIS. There's also Mapbox, which does a lot. It's not nearly as deeply featured as ArcGIS, but helps you get a long way towards like making a web map look and feel how you want without you needing to become a coder. Now, I'm assuming that when you took this course, you probably know something about mapping. You might just have a mapping project that you want to take on, but chances are that you in some way have done something with mapping. Maybe you've used ArcGIS, maybe you've used QGIS. Maybe you are a geographer or a cartographer, but you're trying to switch over to doing things on the web because you heard that that's a good area to go into. It definitely is. You can do a lot when you become more advanced in programming. With programs like ArcGIS or Mapbox, you can take things pretty far, but you're always kind of stuck a little inside the confines of these programs. You can't totally customize things. It'll always end up looking a little bit like an ArcGIS map, like a Tableau map, like a Mapbox map. And you won't be able to get all the features in just the way you want. But when you're a programmer, you can totally do that. One of the other things about web maps, or just about mapping in general, is to remember when we're making our map that we are telling a story, or we have to have a purpose with our map. Especially when we're beginning as programmers, we can kind of forget about this because we're so busy learning things. But it's important when you're making a map to recognize how complicated a map is to look at for an average person. This map that I'm looking at right now, it's been simplified to a certain degree. I can see the streets and roads and names, and then there's the names of locations, there's highway markers, there's geographic areas, there's mountains, and suddenly I realize, even though this has been simplified a lot, it's still a ton of information. And it is being done for a specific reason. It wants me, generally Google Maps is used to get from point A to point B, or to just like look up an address or something like that. So it's been done with that in mind. When I look at a satellite layer, especially if I get rid of the roads, I can't remember how you do that. Anyway, you can get rid of the roads. I forget how to turn that off and on. But then I'm just looking at it for a totally different reason, just to like see the land, right? And so when we're making our maps, that's something I'm going to be emphasizing a couple times, is the importance of remembering who's your audience, what's the point of what you're doing. Don't overcomplicate a map. It's already complicated enough. There is so much going on this Google map. There's all these buttons, there's layers, there's zooming in and out, compass stuff, 3D, street map. There's a lot going on, but they've managed to simplify it enough that you can just get to the core without being completely overwhelmed. And we're going to kind of try to do that with our map design. Now, a couple other just very minor key concepts before we go into a whole section about concepts is just different types of geography. We're going to be dealing with points, so just single locations like an address, lines, which are like these highway lines, and polygons, which are things more like oceans or maybe sometimes like the area of a mountain or a lake or the area of a city, a district, something like that. Those are our kind of key types of geography. Then we also deal with pop-ups, which we don't actually have happen on a Google. Oh, actually we do. There it is. We have a pop-up if I just hover over Vancouver. It's like a div essentially that jumps up when I hover or click, and info boxes, which are just another term for a pop-up. Those are kind of all our really, really core concepts when it comes to working on a map. Here's a polygon, by the way. Like I said, the next lessons we're going to go over a whole bunch of different concepts that are specific to web maps, but I wanted to do that just very high level introduction.